Right, morning everybody. Can you all hear me? Thanks to the technology, that's great. Thank you for inviting me to speak to Men's Breakfast. I have been to Men's Breakfast before, but it was a very long time ago. So here I am back again. Thank you. And today I'm going to talk about hospital chaplaincy, hopefully for about 20 minutes, and there'll be time for questions afterwards. But I might have a pause halfway through if I need a little break, and then you can fire the odd question to give me a little break. Now, thinking about this talk, I could have told you all about the NHS and chaplaincy and how it's part of the NHS setup, how it began, how it changed and developed, and so on. But I thought, no, I won't do that. Instead, I will make it more personal. I'll start with my own story, how I got involved, and then I will recount as many of the stories of those I met and cared for as I can fit in. This will, I hope, give you a picture that begins to hang together, and there will be time for questions afterwards. So my story began in around 1980, when I was in my late 30s, working as an architect for FCO and traveling the world. And I had a wife, Anne, and 2 small children. I was also a church member in a conventional way, but my faith was not that central to my life. Everything changed when I had a mysterious illness and found myself in hospital at St. George's in isolation with a heart problem. I was kept in for an investigation to find out what the problem was. I knew very little, but I imagined the worst. There I had a spiritual experience through a dream, and I dreamt that I was falling down a black hole, a dream full of fear, and that when I reached the bottom, I was caught and held by unseen hands. I felt completely safe, and when I woke up the next day, all the fear had gone. Later that same day, I was told that I had not got a rare heart condition after all, but quite a common one, an arrhythmia caused by a leaky valve. And I was sent home with some pills. Reflecting later on my dream, I felt sure that God had been present there. And this was a special sign for me that I was safe in his hands. There was also a follow-up experience when I was waiting in a cardiac outpatient clinic, and a voice told me to go and talk to a mother and son there who looked very worried. And so my chaplaincy role began. After my recovery, I signed on as a chaplaincy volunteer at Guy's Hospital, which was near where I worked. I had my own ward of 25 patients, which I visited once a week. A small beginning. After 10 years, I felt a need to change, and I did 5 years as an assistant honorary chaplain at Princess Alice Hospice, learning how to care for people at end of life. The crunch point came in the year 2000, when I was 55, when I had the opportunity for early retirement from FCO, and I experienced a call to do chaplaincy full-time. But when I applied, I was turned down the first time by the Church of England selection process. But I succeeded at the second attempt in 2002. I was already working at Guy's and St Thomas's by then as a trainee chaplain with heart and kidney patients. I completed ordination training by 2004, when I was ordained deacon in Ashtead parish here, and also then did a chaplaincy MA at Leeds University. So looking back, there was a 20-year gap between that spiritual experience at St George's Hospital and my first full-time job with a chaplain badge in 2001. But God moves in a mysterious way. I worked at Guy's and St Thomas's for 20 years, from 2001 to 2020, and found it immensely fulfilling, always with the sense that this was where God had wanted me to be. And I went on to do a PhD research into chronic illness and faith, and also teaching chaplaincy students, when I really enjoyed passing on what I had learnt. In my talk today, I want to describe some formative experiences which shaped my own development. In that first ward at Guy's, I got a printout each week with patients' names and religion on it. Perhaps 15 out of the 25 were labelled C of E, so I thought perhaps that I should visit these. But it turned out that the C of E label did not mean very much. Maybe baptism and Sunday school way back, but then often lapsed or nominal church attendance. So I made the decision to visit all the patients on the ward, regardless of their religious label, and I've stuck with that decision ever since. Another formative event for me came on a Friday afternoon at Guy's, when I discovered among the other wards a dialysis unit full of kidney patients. These were in effect outpatients coming in for half a day for 3 times a week. But no one seemed to have considered their spiritual needs. So over time I set up a specialist team of students and volunteers who ran the Living Well program, designed for dialysis patients in particular. It ran for 7 or 8 years and became the basis for my research into chronic illness. Patients may do dialysis for 5, 10, or even 20 years. So it means that over time, you get to know them very well, a special kind of spiritual family. I also had an admissions ward at St. Thomas's for some years. This included each week 2 or 3 rough sleepers who often also had alcohol and drug problems. A common request was, "Excuse me, Father, you don't have a pair of size 40 trousers or size 10 boots you could get for me?" The nurses used to take away their clothes so that they did not slip out and escape to get a drink at the pub across the road. So that's what the need was. I want to structure the second part of my talk around 3 key topics. Who is chaplaincy for? What is its religious significance? And what does it achieve? First, who is chaplaincy for? My ward I described, the first one, had this little list of C of E patients. I'm going to have a little demonstration to do now, because I decided for this talk to put on my dog collar. So at the moment, I just look like a clergyman, don't I, an Anglican clergyman. But if I go on the ward, I have to put on badges. I've got several here. So here we go. Here's one badge. Here's another one. And then I have to have, this is the NHS name badge. You get disciplined if you don't put that on. And here's one for the private hospital, which was also on Guy's site. And another one for London Bridge, which is across the road. So lots of badges. And now I'm not just a clergyman anymore. I'm a chaplain, and I work for the NHS. So going around the ward, dog collar badge, etc., that people see you coming and they look at you with apprehension and curiosity, eagerness or weariness. And you can read the body language. It may say, "I want to talk," or alternatively, "Go away and leave me alone. I'm an atheist." And so your first task is to building bridges, being sensitive to the response. The question you ask yourself is, who are the 2 or 3 people on this ward who really need to talk to me today? Usually because of anxiety or distress. The rest may just be routine conversations, which needn't last too long. And then there is the trigger or turning point. You go through the usual topics: illness and symptoms, family, work and life interests. And then suddenly, not always, there is a turning point. I'm going to trust this person, this chaplain, and tell them what is really on my mind or on my heart, the patient thinks. Sometimes it is the operation tomorrow, but not always. It could be something that happened 10 years ago. I lost a child or a parent. It changed my life. I still haven't got over it. Second, I want to turn to the religious or faith significance of chaplaincy. This is important because going out and being a good listener can be draining and exhausting. Ultimately, you will run out of steam. Some chaplaincy encounters end in prayer, and this is the heart of it. A good chaplain will offer to God what he has just heard and pray the prayer that the patient would have prayed had he been able to express it clearly. Over time, the patient gains confidence, learns that the door is open, and becomes able to communicate to God what is on his or her own heart. Here I need to turn to accounts of religious experience in hospital, which are quite common. My first story is about a lovely elderly Catholic lady of Italian background who said to me, "You're not going to believe this, but there was an angel in my room last night. I haven't told anybody because they might think I'm crazy." I told her, yes, I did believe her, and that this was a powerful sign of God's blessing, an experience that she should always treasure. Clearly, it did not matter at all whether it was a real angel with wings and so on, or a vision of an angel in that room. It meant the same thing. God was watching over her. Other forms of religious experience include near-death experiences, which happen, for example, during heart operations, when the heart stops. There is a typical pattern: a long dark tunnel, a bright light, perhaps heavenly music, and someone at the end waiting to welcome the person through a doorway. And then the person comes back. What is interesting is that these can happen to people of no religious faith. And for the first time, they face the possibility that there is something more, something beyond death, and that it was not frightening or scary, but rather calm and peaceful. My third example concerns punishment. A Polish Catholic lady was in tears because she was convinced her cancer had come as a punishment from God because her attendance at Mass had stopped. Convincing her that God was fundamentally loving and forgiving and did not use illness to punish people brought huge relief. This story also shows how chaplains can work as a team across faith and denominational boundaries. When the Filipino nursing sister says, "Hello, Father," she is giving me the same respect as she does her Catholic priest. I also noticed this with some Muslim patients who clearly wanted to talk. Their concerns are just like anyone else's. How will I cope? What will my family do? And so on. And if they ask for prayer, it can also be moving because it shows that they trust you and accept your spiritual authority. This suggests that the real division in hospital is not between faiths, but between those who have faith and so can trust in God during their illness, and those who do not. Thirdly, what is the result of chaplaincy? What does it achieve? A little bit of theology. The theology of chaplaincy begins with Psalm 130. Out of the deep have I called unto you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. God, listen to me. Help me out now. It takes boldness to pray that prayer, doesn't it? It suggests that, in fact, the speaker knows and is on familiar terms with this God who is being addressed so insistently, and that this person has a confident working relationship with him. But most people will not have that, and so will never pray in such an assertive way. And so for both chaplain and patient, there is some faith work, some learning to be done. First lesson, I am a much loved child of God. I can approach him with confidence, recount my distress, and express all my needs. Yes, but there are so many buts. Sin, disappointment, hurt, anger, all of which create barriers to a relationship with God. At the heart of chaplaincy is this disclosure process, describing, revealing, expressing the burden, whatever it is. The theologian Dorothy Soller describes three kinds of suffering: mute suffering, expressed and shared suffering, and suffering that leads to action and to remedy. The desired outcome of chaplaincy is that suffering that is hidden away may be described and expressed, firstly to the chaplain, but ultimately to God, the only true healer and restorer of souls. Also, expression and disclosure leads to finding appropriate help so that suffering is addressed and alleviated. This can be easier said than done. At one extreme is the patient that just bursts into tears the moment the chaplain arrives. She had been just waiting for someone to come and listen. At the other extreme is the person who is prickly, evasive, guarded and angry because so much has already gone wrong. I remember a couple both having different sorts of cancer treatment. I suggested family support to them, and they said, "Oh no, we are much too angry to want to talk to anybody." My postscript talks a little about two people I got to know through my research and development projects, first with dialysis and then with cancer outpatients. Both concern coping with long-term illness and its spiritual impact. First, I want to talk about Joanne, not her real name, one of my dialysis patients, a rather large black lady, a born-again Christian full of life, who regularly gave her testimony in her Pentecostal church. Joanne had a few years before reached a point of despair, when after 3 years of prayer for healing, nothing had happened. There was no miracle. But Joanne made a vow to God that if he would allow her to serve him within this illness, then she would serve him as his disciple. And so she did. She ran the church bookstore. She manned the 24-hour helpline. She gave her testimonies. But they did not describe miraculous healing, which was what people expected. She explained how God had found her in her despair and given her hope and a new start, enabling her to help many others in the same situation. And then secondly, there was Doreen, a blind black lady, also a strong Christian. Doreen had a 3-year-old grandson whom she loved to bits. Her grandson helped her to find all her things and knew exactly where everything was. So she was able to look after him when the family was out, which gave her a really important role. In the White Stick story, she told how an instructor from the Blind Society came and taught her how to go out and walk with a white stick on her own down the road. Now her husband and son were totally opposed to this idea, fearful of all the accidents that could happen. But eventually, Doreen was able to cross the road on her own and walk in the park opposite, a sign of her strong pride and independence. What do these stories mean or represent? In the end, patients bear witness to their own suffering, how they have come through, how God has found them in their moments of despair. This is me. This is who I am. This is how far I have come. And God has been with me all the way. I am his child. All they need is someone who will listen and receive their stories and affirm and recognize the struggles they have faced living with illness. Unfortunately, my research found that some churches are not very good at supporting those with long-term illness because they contradict their own theology that God always saves, fixes things, and heals. And so my final section poses a theological question. Where is God most at work? Where are you most likely to find him? Is he there in the busy, healthy, active world of the faith community? Yes, he is. But in my experience, God's Holy Spirit, is very much present too in that other world of illness and deprivation, where there is so much need, and so many are crying out for a God who will be with them, will answer their call and sustain them in their trouble. And so 3 verses of scripture to close from the prophet Ezekiel in chapter 34, which I preached on after my ordination. This chapter is a prophecy against the shepherds of Israel and has strong links to Jesus' own description of himself as the Good Shepherd in John chapter 10. So in verse 6, my sheep were scattered over all the face of the earth, with no one to search or seek for them. But thus says the Lord, I myself will search for my sheep, and I will seek them out. I will seek the lost, I will bring back the strayed, I will bind up the injured, and I will strengthen the weak. This verse is describing God's activity, not ours. It is in his nature to seek the lost and bring back the strayed. And so those of us who have had the privilege of serving as chaplains are participating in the activity of the Holy Spirit, which is going on all around us, as we try to catch up with it and work alongside it. My personal chaplaincy story came to an end at lockdown in 2020, when, along with many others, I had to go home. At 75 and with an underlying health condition, I posed too much of a risk to go on working. A new, very different chapter in hospital chaplaincy then began, which I did not experience firsthand. But I hope that the stories I have told you give you a picture of a strong chaplaincy tradition within the NHS, which lasted from 1948 until now, which few other countries can actually match, and of which we, I think, can be justly proud. I am sure it will continue. So I'm happy now to answer any questions you may have, and thank you for listening. Sorry, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Foreign Office, yeah. That's right. That's when I was going up to guys. Yeah, yeah.
I'd also like to say that I have been to, or still go to, an eye clinic at St Thomas, and I was quite thrilled by once looking at the chaplaincy wall, I saw the Roman photographs.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great. It's interesting because St Thomas's is Florence Nightingale. It's where Florence was. In fact, the hospital, St Thomas's Hospital, was actually in London Bridge to start with, where the station is now. And then they built the railway, and they said, right, we've got to move this. So that we'll put it across the river from the House of Parliament, where it is now. And it was a marsh, it was a swamp. And Florence looked at this and said, we're not going there. It's unhealthy, it's full of mosquitoes and all the rest. But anyway, she was persuaded in the end. And of course, then you had this very splendid Victorian hospital with all its blocks, and each one had balconies where the patients were wheeled out so that they could get fresh air. But it had, because of her, it had a strong spiritual tradition of chaplaincy. So it meant that if you're a chaplain, you had your badge, you could go anywhere. And that was not true in many other hospitals around the country, where you had to be asked or invited to go and visit patients. So that was what made it special. Well, I had a children's ward in Evelina for quite a few years. And it was at about that time that I became a grandfather. I've got 5 grandchildren now. But I remember that it was a long time since I'd held a baby. You see, and of course, once you're a grandfather, you start holding babies again. And of course, one thing, particularly with the black patients, is that they want their children blessed. If you've got a dog collar, quite often they would have a Bible open at a particular verse on the children's pillow or under the pillow. And they would want a blessing every time. And that is very much Pentecostal, actually, rather than Anglican. But that shows a lot of faith. Yeah. But actually, the other thing, of course, about Evelina was that the ministry was mainly to the parents. They would be very worried. And sometimes it was all about persuading them to go home. That they might have other children at home, and there was a sick child in hospital. But they needed to have a break or go and see back to the family. But of course and it was just trusting, masses of wonderful nurses, almost one-to-one there. It was just persuading them that their child would be okay and they needed a break. Peter. Yeah, certainly. In 1948, when the NHS was set up, somewhere in the Act of Parliament, it said that every hospital would have a chaplain. It's like a prison. Every prison has to have a chaplain, and so has every hospital. And at that early stage, it would normally have been an Anglican. But even then, there were plenty of other faiths around, weren't there? Jewish faith, Muslim faith, and then, of course, you had different denominations, Catholic, Free Church, Anglican, and so on. So the Anglican chaplain originally would act as a kind of honest broker, and he would have a whole list of names of different ministers, including the Catholic priest and so on, that he could just ring up and call in. But it was his job to find everybody. So he did the wandering round. And actually, that's probably the most important thing you can do, because people don't ask usually, unless it's an emergency or they're at death's door. They don't just say, no, I want the chaplain to come and talk to me now. And they can ask for that. You see, that was what in the original provision. So does that answer your question? I mean, it has, the debate within the profession has been, is it a profession? Okay. Is it just your local vicar or clergy or minister can just come in and do this? Because obviously any minister can come in and pray with somebody, particularly if they're part of his flock. But actually, I feel strongly that it is a separate profession because there's so much training needed. And it would be very hard to run a parish, say, next to St. Thomas's, for example, and then just pop in and see patients. It just wouldn't work because the job is much so time consuming. It has to be full time. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. My team leader, I think, used to spend a lot of time with staff. She was well known and a very good listener. When I worked at Princess Alice Hospice, there's a whole area there of caring for end of life, and it's changed a lot, actually. The hospice movement actually changed the way that the whole end of life thing was done within the main NHS, and it improved it enormously, and people got much better care. But certainly staff are stressed. I wouldn't say that they automatically call for the chaplain, but they do if there's been a difficult bereavement or death in a ward, and suddenly the whole staff, need some kind of feedback, some kind of offloading session, which a chaplain will do. And that's important, yeah. 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 So let me say that out of 10 Anglicans, I probably saw more Pentecostal patients than Anglicans because of the mix in that area, and mainly black. But out of 10 Anglicans I saw, I would say probably 8 would be lapsed. So that gives a bit of food for thought for us, Richard, doesn't it? But, they fell out with the vicar. He wouldn't baptize their grandchild. He wouldn't marry them if they were divorced. All those sorts of things. He didn't come to tea, or somebody else in the church. And of course, once those things happen, they don't get mended. It was 25 years ago. That vicar's probably long dead, or retired, And yet, what people don't see is that the church is full of humans, including human beings, and it's different from God. God is still a loving God and wants everybody to come back, but they've still got this huge chip on their shoulder. And so as chaplains, you get quite a lot of that. You also get the silly stuff like, I don't like my vicar. He chooses all the wrong hymns. It's a woman. I don't like women. All those kind of grouses, and that can be a huge distraction because it stops you talking about the real, what's going on inside them. But yes, it's a big area because, of course, they don't see church people anymore, but they can see the chaplain if they're ill. Yeah. But some people actually have a very strong faith and they don't do organized religion. They've got their Bible there, they've got little notes, they read it every day. Say, I talk to God. And our job with them is not to say, no, get back to 11 o'clock on Sunday. It's not that really, because you can see that they've got faith, can't you? And that's great, really. Yes, I had my Muslim colleague Abdul at St Thomas. I went to his we all went to his wedding actually. It was in a big school in Mile End Road, and there were two. It had two halls, male and female, and all the men were in this one, and all the women were in that one. And in the whole wedding, we never saw the bride. Okay, she never appeared, and it was a very, very traditional Muslim wedding. That's an aside, but so you're working in the same office with people of quite different faiths, and the other faiths don't all have the same idea of chaplaincy. In the Muslim tradition, an imam is not a pastor necessarily. He's more of a teacher and leader, and a lot of the pastoral care is given by families. So in the private hospital I visit, there were lots of people from the Middle East, and they come over for treatment and bring a lot of family members, especially women, with them, and they're completely lost because they're in this strange country. The chaplain, the pastoral care idea, is not present in the same way across all faiths, but they still love to see their own faith representative, their faith leader. I mean, I could go on, but there was an Ethiopian Orthodox lady, and in their tradition, they must have holy water. You know, if I don't come and sprinkle you, priest with all his robes and everything has got to come and sprinkle you with holy water. Otherwise, you won't get better. And so we had to try and find something. There was one in London, but he was on holiday. So he got him the following week or something, and then he came. Anything else? I think my time has almost run out. Yeah, I mean, in chronic illness, in other words, all these illnesses where you don't get better, whether it's kidney or MS or ME, all those, you need your faith, don't you? I find it very few actually gave up on their faith because you need it much more. But the problem they had was that people did not understand, especially people in their own churches or faith groups, because they wouldn't get better. They were an embarrassment. We've already prayed for you 10 times. Why didn't you get better? And they would start to think it was their own fault, you see. And that's just bad teaching, really. In fact, I had this idea about called faith work. If you get long-term cancer, long-term anything, you don't know the answer, the faith answer, because you didn't get it in your sermon last Sunday, but you work it out. And there's plenty of scripture about suffering, and what happens is that you reinterpret your faith to suit living with that illness. And it's a much harder world, but God is there, and also there's lots of opportunities to serve God there because there's lots of other people in that situation with you. And it's hard, and if someone with faith like Joanne, the lady I mentioned, can be a really shining light because there's so much need, basically. Does that answer your question?